I'm thrilled to be here today. Good morning to all of you in the room, and good afternoon wherever you are around the world. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce the Honorable Mary Ng to come and talk to us. She's been a Member of Parliament since 2017 for Markham Thornhill, and clearly has a passion for economic development. Because the portfolios always has portfolios that she has had so far, the two have one thing in common. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's economic development. So we're really thankful for that, Mr. Ng. And it's evident also in the way that you interact with local communities, with the public, and also in the press that you are doing for that. And that's, we highly appreciate it. As an engineer, highly appreciate it. You're also, she's also a devoted community leader who's always believed in the power of public service, with the underlining of the service, right? And has 20 years of experience in areas of education, women's leadership, job creation, and entrepreneurship. Minister Ng immigrated to Canada from Hong Kong, an immigrant, as I am, as many of us are. Coming here to Canada to help build the Canada of the future, it's fantastic, and thank you very much for doing that, bringing with you your learnings that you have accumulated around the struggle and eventual success that you are experiencing now, for many, as a clear example to many immigrants in Canada. So I'm looking forward to listening to your wisdom. And thank you for being with us here today, Minister Ng.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much for that introduction, Joe. And I don't know how much wisdom there is. I think the wisdom is really those in the room here and those who are joining us virtually from the African continent. Bonjour tout le monde. And for those who are in Africa, good afternoon and good evening. Let me also do an acknowledgement. I want to thank Madam Chief for starting us off in a very good way, to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional lands of many Indigenous nations, and there's a long history and contributions of the first people of this land. And here I want to recognize the contributions of the First Nations, the Métis, the Inuit in Canada, and a special acknowledgement to the Mississaugas of Credit, the Huron, the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Chippewas people. And for those of us who are settlers or immigrants to Canada, it's important to recognize that Indigenous peoples have always been here, and that we all can play a role in reconciliation. Well, it's hard to believe that it's 30 years of the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business, and that we're at Africa Accelerating 2023. So very, very welcome. How wonderful it is. And this morning when I was sort of just saying my hellos, someone sort of said it's, I think Sebastian, it's you who said, that the theme, the African born in them. I do feel that way. I feel that way a lot. And coming here and having an opportunity to see, friends and colleagues for the first time, really in person after, I guess it is 3-4 years now. I was first appointed the trade minister by Prime Minister Trudeau, and it was at the end of 2019. And in 2020, we were able to do one trip. I was able to do one trip in person, and that was to the African continent. It was for I accompanied the Prime Minister to the African Union, but I also took the opportunity to do a trade mission, because what kind of a trade minister would you be, even a new one after being minted only a couple of months, if you didn't do that? So it really is terrific to see everyone here in person. Again, it's been a while, like I said, where we are all in a room like this. Let me begin, though, by thanking Gareth, you, and Paula, you, in the work that you do. Sebastian, it is so nice to see you. Very nice to see you. A big round of applause for the entire team at the CABC, because it takes enormous effort, skill, dedication, and probably many other verbs to describe what you do, to bring together everyone in this wonderful conference that really is about building the bridges between Canada and Africa. So a big round of applause to you. And of course, here at Goodman's, Randy, very nice. Thank you so much for hosting us. There was a theme here going on, right? There's a musician, there's a scuba diver, and I was sitting here thinking, what is it that I could actually tell people that I do beyond my job that is interesting? And I have to tell you, I'm sitting here thinking, I don't think I can come up with one. So I'm going to have to take up a hobby of some sort. But thank you so much, Goodman's, for hosting us. Hatch, of course, thank you for being this year's main sponsor, along with so many of the sponsors who've contributed to bringing this together. And of course, you'll meet her a little later in more depth, but my Assistant Deputy Minister, Cheryl Urban, is here, and she's the Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for the Sub-Saharan African branch at Global Affairs. So I want to thank you because of the terrific work you do in supporting my work as the Minister, and she'll be hosting a roundtable a little later. So it's terrific. And of course, Your Excellency, Megan, you got to move over so I can see Your Excellency. Your Excellency, Deputy Prime Minister Kamehe. It's wonderful to have you here, and welcome to Canada. We are going to have a more in-depth meeting later, but it was wonderful to hear you and your president and the country's vision for the reconstructing of and the reconstruction going forward of the DRC. So I'm looking forward to the meeting that you and I will have. As you were speaking, I took notes, so it'll be wonderful for us to think about what it is that we could be doing together more of between Canada and the DRC. And as you heard from Paula and Gareth, they are teasing you a little bit to keep you here for the next 3 days, because notice they're only giving you little bits and pieces of information. Right, so that's wonderful. But over the next 3 days, I know you're going to hear a lot about how to accelerate and what will be done to accelerate the Canada-Africa business development, how to deliver responsible economic growth, and how critical roles like universities and colleges and other stakeholders will play, the private sector will play in Canada and Africa's prosperity. But I think perhaps the most exciting part of this is that you will continue to connect over the next 3 days. And in many cases, you will reconnect. As I said earlier, we haven't had an opportunity to do this in person in this way with this audience here in person, but also virtually. So I think it is this reconnection. And I think that that's the theme of this conference as well, which has added people at the heart of it. Where you can think about the ways that this connection and that reconnection continues to shape the relationship, the people relationships, bringing out the entrepreneurial spirit and that collaboration and cooperation between the African nations and Canada. And I would encourage everyone to spend the 3 days as best as you can, because it really is through these people connections and the business-to-business connections that will shape the future that I believe will be to the benefit of both Africans and Canadians alike. Pour commencer, permettez-moi de vous préciser quelque chose. Pour le gouvernement du Canada, la prospérité de l'Afrique est très importante. In fact, Prime Minister Trudeau has made it one of my priorities to develop a strategy on economic cooperation across Africa, which is one of the fastest growing economic regions in the world. I don't need to tell you that. You had fabulous people who were already on stage, including the president of Kenya, and of course the deputy prime minister who is here, and countless others in this room who can talk about the benefits of the growth in Africa. We know that there is vast economic potential that exists. There's a young and tech-savvy population that is driving this economic transformation. It's a transformation that's also fueled by digitization, by innovation, by research in many, many key sectors. Agriculture and agro-processing, mining and minerals, clean technology, pharmaceuticals, transportation and logistics, the digital economy, and this list goes on longer, but I'm restricted by time. And I have had the fortunate opportunity to see this entrepreneurial spirit of Africa's dynamic economies firsthand. In 2020, as I said earlier, I had the opportunity to attend Mining Indaba in South Africa, and there, along on that trip, was to the African Union, but it was also a trade mission to Ethiopia as well as to Kenya. In 2021, despite us being in the middle of a pandemic, Canada co-hosted with Senegal and Ethiopia the inaugural Canada-Africa Clean Growth Symposium. And it brought together over 1,400 people. So 1,400 people participated, including from 35 African countries. It just shows the appetite for this collaboration between Canada and Africa. And then last year, we did virtual trade missions to Botswana, to Cote d'Ivoire, to Senegal, and to South Africa. And throughout these experiences, I saw the Canadian and African businesses building relationships, learning from each other, sharing innovative ideas and solutions, seeking opportunities for investments both ways. And therefore, I think we have a real foundation for growth. My apologies, I have double-sided pages, so I'm trying to figure out if I got it right. This is what happens when you print from home in the morning. So instead of my staff who said, please take this paper because it's one-sided, and I said, no, don't worry. So now, of course, I regret it. And they were right because exactly they were right. But my strongest takeaways from what I just described, as well as being on the ground in Africa a few times, because I was there before I was in this job too. But my strong takeaways is this concept, which I learned somewhere along the way from the African people, and it's a concept of Ubuntu, which means humanity. And I think we're all here, and others spoke about it because I think it is about what we all do and what we are all able to do together. That is in the spirit of warmth and of humanity. And I think that is a true feeling today because of all of us. And we wouldn't be able to do it without the people and without the humanity and without all of us wishing to do this. And the wishing to do it is building this, deepening this relationship between Canada and Africa. Car les activités comme celle-ci se fondent sur le travail formidable que le Canada et l'Afrique ont déjà accompli ensemble pour renforcer leur collaboration économique. It's events like this that build on the terrific work between Canada and Africa, what we've done together to continue to deepen our economic cooperation. I had a terrific discussion a little earlier in the year when Canada hosted the African Union Commissioner for Economic Development and Trade. So His Excellency Albert Muchanga was here, and I had an opportunity to host him in Ottawa. And there we had the first inaugural Canada AUC Trade Policy Dialogue just earlier in May. And right after that trade policy dialogue, we launched public consultations here in Canada on the Canada-Africa Economic Cooperation Strategy. So we've heard a lot of input from people here in Canada, from those in Africa. I'm looking forward to getting deeply briefed on this work. But I do believe that it is laying the groundwork and the foundation for the work we are about to do. Before Commissioner Muchanga arrived in Canada, the Prime Minister and a number of us cabinet ministers also had a high-level dialogue with His Excellency, the AU Commission Chairperson in Chairperson Faki and his delegation. So you can see that we've had quite a rich engagement on trade and investment, but also in this relationship, between our governments. Mais notre relation ne s'arrête pas là. There's even more to this relationship. I spoke of the deep people-to-people ties. You can see that across the communities here, right across Canada. But let me just share with you a bit of the trade numbers. Two-way merchandise trade between Canada and the African continent increased 60% in just the last 5 years, from $9 billion to $15 billion. And between 2012 and 2021, so in a 10-year period, this, I think, is even more exciting when I saw these numbers. Canadian investments in clean technology on the continent have grown 127%, from 75 million to 171 million. We heard from you, Deputy Prime Minister, and you, Sebastian, and others about how important it is that we are, as well as the President of Kenya, how important it is for us to be fighting climate change and build our economies and our businesses at the same time. In Canada, we have a phrase: the environment and the economy can go hand in hand, and our policies and our work is guided by this really important principle of looking after your planet, fighting climate change, and using the tools that are the economic tools to be able to do this. Le Canada et l'Afrique ont jeté les bases d'une relation solide et matière de commerce et d'investissement. Et notre tâche consiste maintenant à voir comment nous pouvons l'approfondir. We have a foundation for a strong Canada-Africa trade and investment relationship. So our task now is, how do we keep building on this? And one way to do this is through the support that Canada has worked on for now a number of years on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and we were very supportive of this agreement. It's a system that will promote more open trade and create benefits for businesses, not only for African businesses, but indeed for Canadian businesses who will find more stability to create partnerships and promote that economic development in Africa. In recent years, you heard the stats that I just shared about clean growth. But when I heard the Deputy Prime Minister talk about hydroelectricity or minerals, or the resources that you have in the DRC. I mean, much of what you said, you could actually replace that with Canada, because Canada too has an abundance of resources. We too are a hydroelectric powerhouse. We have developed technologies and capabilities. So I think that there are synergies. There are synergies that I heard you speak of, which no doubt we'll have a chance to speak about a little further. But it does very much speak to how in industries large and small, that we can really fight climate change and build our respective economies. I see the opportunity for the expansion of Canadian companies to offer innovative solutions right across the spectrum and right across the African continent. I always think it's useful to provide a couple of examples, and I have a couple of really great examples of a company that's based here in Ontario. It's called Ray Solar, but they're doing renewable energy systems in communities across West Africa. There's another company here in Toronto called M1, and they are specialized in smart electricity infrastructure, and they've electrified 49 health and education centers in Nigeria using solar-powered microgrids. And I think if I were to go through every continent of every country in the continent, I bet you any money that I could probably find you a Canadian example. I mean, I won't, because I think the others are going to kill me for spending a lot of time here, more time than I'm allotted. But all is to say is that what I described earlier, which is the people-to-people relationships, the great work the the Chamber is doing and the commitment that the Chamber continues to have in facilitating government and businesses to come together. Our work in Canada's contribution in the development of the AFC FTA. I think many people may not know this, but Canada has spent about 20 years through the Africa Trade Policy Center based out of Addis Ababa in working with the various countries in Africa around the capacity building and sharing that knowledge and the expertise, because Canada, we know a little something about free trade agreements. We do a lot of them. I do a lot of them, and Canada does a lot of them. But I think it's important to contribute where we are able, and we're very pleased to have contributed to this work. We've also done work that supports women and girls, and particularly women entrepreneurs, a passion of mine, because our view here in Canada, and I think it's a shared view, when you include everyone in your economy, including women, Indigenous peoples, racialized entrepreneurs, new immigrant entrepreneurs, micro, small, and medium sizes, then your economy works for everyone. So we spend a lot of time doing that here. But I think the promise here, which is something that Minister Hussein, who is the Minister of International Development, he's also an Ethiopian Canadian. But one of the things that he and I work on is what we call the development to trade nexus. It's about how do we work together in such a way to maximize the trade and development nexus, because it is what we can contribute around capacity and in the area of development that then becomes the road to greater facilitation of trade. And it is really about inclusive trade. You see in Canada's trade agreements how we have architecture, those very strong provisions in our trade agreements, whether it is protections for labor, protections on the environment, inclusive elements that encourage and that put into our agreements opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses, for women entrepreneurs, because, and I think everyone will agree, when everyone succeeds, we all succeed. So during this year's Africa Accelerate conference, let's build that next, another critical layer. I mean, every time you do this, we keep building the building blocks of this foundation that will deepen the relationship between Africa, the countries in Africa, and Canada. And I think this partnership is reaffirmed by our shared commitment to a strong and prosperous Africa, which will lead to a brighter future for all of us. Parce qu'ensemble, nous sommes plus forts, because we're in this together. And isn't that the essence of Ubuntu? So, merci beaucoup, Miigwech. Thank you so much.